Are you really sure that you want this certificate to be accepted? I asked the woman in front of me. She nodded happily with a charming smile. And rightfully so. What she had submitted was a birth certificate. She must have gone through a lot in giving birth, yet the young woman seemed to be savoring the joy of her growing family with a mother's determination. I received this birth certificate because I am a civil servant who works here. I checked the document carefully for any errors. I paid special attention to the part about the father, but she waited patiently without changing her expression as I proceeded with the paperwork. Occasionally, she would talk to the man standing next to her about thank you gifts and introducing the baby. As for the man she was talking to, he didn't even offer a proper response. No, maybe he couldn't. The man's face turned pale, he trembled, and he avoided my gaze, as if trying to escape. And rightly so, I thought once again. After all, this trembling and pitiful man is my husband. I am Aaliyah. I'm married and I've been working at the city hall for 10 years. We don't have any children, but my husband, who worked at a trading company, and I were content with a modest life, planning to continue living quietly as a couple. I thought so. I began to notice something strange about my husband, Grayson. I think it was after he passed the promotion exam. If he passes, he can achieve a significant promotion at a young age, so he was studying hard even at home, and I supported him wholeheartedly while managing my own job. Our efforts paid off, and when he achieved the results, I was genuinely thrilled. He became one of the top performers among his peers, with high expectations of a promising future from those around him. His boss even mentioned introducing him to business partners, and he started going to high-end clubs almost every week. For my husband, this was probably the time in his life when he received the most attention and praise. Perhaps this led to a misunderstanding. When he returned from these luxurious and glamorous outings, the meals I prepared seemed very simple and frugal to him, and he gradually began to make condescending remarks. Another cheap vegetable stir-fry? My salary has gone up. You can afford something more luxurious, you know. At first, he said things like that. But over time, his language became harsher, and he started directing it at me. Why don't you buy more expensive domestic beef? We had some good beef on the day of the celebration, didn't we? But I'm worried about buying expensive beef and then cooking it badly. You're not a bad cook, are you? It feels like you are saying indirectly, I don't make enough money. And I don't like that. Of course I don't feel that way at all. Money goes into other areas besides food, and I thought that if our salary increased, it was important to tighten our belts and continue with our lifestyle. One day, he finally said, I can't talk to people about eating something like this, and he would no longer eat what I was cooking. My husband, who used to say things like, thanks to Aaliyah and, I'm lucky to have a wonderful wife, when he got promoted, had changed so much. Aaliyah, aren't you motivated to do household chores? Ha! What do you mean by that? There's nothing like that. I'm just. You haven't watered the plants outside, have you? Weeds have started growing too. And I asked you to wash the car, didn't I? How long do you plan on not doing it? You've been saying you're busy lately, but is working at the city hall such a busy job that you can't do household chores? I made sure not to let dirty dishes or laundry pile up, but I didn't have time for the potted plants around the entrance. Weeding was also something I couldn't get to on weekdays, and washing the car took even more time. Besides, my husband was the one who drove the car, so it didn't make sense to leave it to me. His one-sided condescending remarks were increased and continued day by day, even if it didn't escalate into a fight. He began to link the state of our household chores with my job, even mocking the fact that I worked for the city hall. I remembered the days when I had desperately prepared for the civil service exam and somehow managed to calm my frustration. If you're busy, I'll eat out for a while, so you don't have to worry about household chores. Next week is our anniversary. Do you remember the restaurant you used to reserve for us every year? I had marked the date on the calendar. It was our go-to place for anniversaries, a popular and somewhat expensive restaurant that we had been using for special occasions even before we got married. He used to make reservations there 6 months in advance. Could that have changed too? When I asked hesitantly, he suddenly brightened his expression. However, his next words were so shocking that it felt like my heart was breaking. Oh, of course. I've already made a reservation there. It's just that I couldn't coordinate with my client that day. Also, I've been told to set things up for you soon, so that place is good for that, and I recommended it. Huh? What do you mean by recommended? Well, the reservation for our anniversary is for the business dinner. Don't you get it? There's no point in celebrating forcefully on the actual day, and since I made the reservation, it doesn't matter. He said this calmly. I felt my tears were coming, but I didn't want him to see me crying, so I managed to hold them back. That's not what I'm saying. I was taken aback by my husband's behavior. I didn't know what words to say, and got stuck. He looked at me like I was a nuisance. If you didn't have that job at the city hall, and took care of things at home, I'd work harder when I come back. But if you can't even handle the household chores, then what's the point of having a job? Why don't you just quit? It was true that I had been coming home late lately, as I had been called in to help in a different department. I thought he wanted me to quit my job, because I was not doing all chores properly, but it seemed like he was just taking it out on me. I know our income is steady, but I have people in the city I'm responsible for. I can't help but be busy. Besides, I take pride in my work. It's all important work. He said a lot of terrible things to me, but I had no intention of quitting. A few weeks later, I was working as usual, and the city hall service tended to be extremely crowded on long weekends and holidays. Even though it wasn't my department, I made an effort to help the citizens who came in to avoid any confusion, so I directed them to the appropriate personnel and help in any way I could. Just then, a couple approached, and the woman handed me a form with a friendly smile. We came to submit a birth certificate for our newborn. Since it is not what I usually handle, I couldn't accept it. I was about to tell her that I would check with the staff when I looked at the man beside her. And I was stunned beyond belief. Grayson. It was supposed to be my husband, Grayson, and our eyes met. After a mutual surprise, he awkwardly averted his gaze. Could you please make sure everything is correct? The woman, seemingly unaware of the situation, handed me the form and waited. Grayson's name was filled in the husband's section of the birth certificate. Congratulations. I will confirm with the staff, so please wait for a moment. I guided them calmly. I returned to the counter and checked with the appropriate staff, but they still seemed occupied, perhaps due to a heavy workload. I couldn't process the paperwork, but I was asked to verify if all the necessary information was correctly filled out. I desperately tried to organize my chaotic thoughts. Maybe I should have confronted Grayson about the earlier situation, but did the woman realize I was his wife when she approached me? I was only helping with guidance today, and perhaps the encounter with the two of them was purely coincidental. We're ready now. I'll check for any discrepancies. Yes, please. I composed myself and returned to them as just a personnel. After I showed them to their seats, I verified the contents of the notification they had submitted. Suddenly, I realized that the day their child was born was our wedding anniversary, and a sharp pain pierced my chest. I clenched my wrist under the counter to hold back my emotions. According to the forms, the woman's name is Lena. She's 24 years old, and there's quite an age gap between her and my husband. She gives off an aura of a calm young lady. She's wearing makeup neatly, and you wouldn't think she had just given birth. Moreover, she didn't look like the kind of person who would have an affair, let alone have a child with her manstress, and come straight to his wife. Her lack of reaction might be because she doesn't even know I exist. I apologize for the inconvenience. This may take some time. It's okay. My husband took a day off, and my parents are taking care of the baby in their car, she replied with a smile. She must find the baby incredibly adorable. She talks about how small and healthy the newborn is. He sitting beside her, of course, couldn't say anything, and had an awkward expression as he stared into space. My calm demeanor probably seemed perplexing to him. Grayson, who had forcibly found excuses and avoided coming back home. I had suspected that he might have an affair, but I never thought it would lead to having a child, so I took a deep breath to avoid being exposed. If it's all right with you, please call your parents as well. It will reassure the baby to have you nearby. Oh, thank you. I was worried too, so I'll do that. Upon my suggestion, she eagerly started dialing a phone number. My husband's face became visibly anxious. I pretended to check the details of the application and go back to the office behind. After preparing the necessary documents, I returned and handed them 2 sheets of paper. When they peered at the documents, their eyes widened, especially Lena, who appeared frozen with shock. The birth certificate currently lists your child as legitimate, but it should actually have the illegitimate box checked. Legitimate signifies a child born to a married couple, I said. She is staring at the form and trembling with a pale face. Alternatively, you can submit a marriage certificate first, becoming a married couple, and then mark it as legitimate child. But we already submitted a marriage certificate. We are married, she stammered. No, that's not the case, I replied. On top of the birth certificate that the two had submitted, I presented a blank marriage certificate and a divorce form. I pointed to the empty space on the divorce form, where my husband's name should be filled in. Could you please fill it out, Grayson? In order to establish a new marital relationship, you must first divorce me, right? By this point, they must have understood. Lena shot me a sharp glare, and immediately turned her intimidating gaze towards the man next to her. I also looked at Grayson, who had turned pale. What kind of nerve does it take to submit a birth certificate for the child you had with your affair partner, at the counter where your wife's there? I exclaimed forcefully, but there was no time for him to answer my questions. Lena stood up abruptly, and the loud noise of the chair overturning interrupted us. She grabbed Grayson, screaming at him. You lied, didn't you? You said you were single, right? You said we should get married because we have a baby. Grayson! Of course, Lena had no way of knowing that he was already married. However, she had quickly discerned Grayson's unfaithful nature and had apparently gotten pregnant to keep him from leaving her. She had no idea that he was already married. They had decided to get married after she became pregnant, but Grayson was newly promoted and very busy. Moreover, Grayson had told his colleagues and business associates that he and his wife were undergoing infertility treatments. He had no intention of divorcing, as it would ruin his story. So, he hadn't submitted the divorce papers, using various excuses like, this weekend is inauspicious, according to a fortune teller. I have to work on the next day off, or it's Lena's father's birthday next time, so let's prioritize the celebration. As he continued to dodge the issue, Lena's morning sickness worsened, leading to her hospitalization. She ended up in and out of the hospital. There's no time for her to think about the marriage certificate. Because of this, it seems that Lena had completely believed Grayson's words that he had already submitted the marriage certificate. If she had thought calmly, There were many things to do after getting married, such as changing the name on your driver's license and bank accounts. However, she was exhausted from the repeated health issues and the first-time experience of childbirth, so she didn't think that far. Lena's face turned bright red, and she exploded in anger. Wait a minute. What about the money I deposited for the wedding funds? Did you use it with this person? What? Grayson, are you borrowing money too? I was surprised when Lena confronted him like that, and I also looked at Grayson in a hurry. Why aren't you saying anything? We have a child together. What's going on? You're always so chatty about things I don't want to hear. What's this about money? Are you borrowing from her? What are you using it for? Grayson seemed to have decided to remain silent, and didn't say a word. It appeared that he had a significant debt with Lena. Of course, there's not a single cent in our household budget, and there's no image of us living beyond our means. Lena didn't listen to the other staff trying to stop her and shook Grayson, demanding an explanation and repayment. I didn't stop her because it was my concern too. As I have the completed divorce papers with me, my feelings had already distanced from Grayson. Fine. I get it. We should just get a divorce, right? If that's what you want, we'll get divorced right here and now. I don't need you at all. Are you satisfied? Finally losing his temper, Grayson, with a bright red face, hastily started filling out the divorce papers. And Lena, you should repay the money too. Just because you're the daughter of a director, you got close to me when I was promoted. His anger turned towards Lena, who had been sobbing uncontrollably for a while now. She had even given birth to his child, and he was saying such things. Just as I was about to intervene, Grayson fell silent, taking a deep breath. He stared intently at someone behind Lena. I turned to look in that direction, and at the entrance of the city hall, there was a middle-aged couple with stern expressions. The woman was holding the baby and didn't move, but the man, dressed in upscale clothing, was striding towards us. Lena clung to the man who had approached them. These must be her parents, whom I had suggested to call earlier. Is what we just heard true? The man questioned Grayson in a low voice, draining the color from Grayson's face. Later, I learned that Grayson and Lena had met at a business dinner with a client. Lena was assisting her father, who was an executive at the client's company, and performing secretary-like tasks. Grayson seemed to have taken a liking to the innocent Lena, who had just graduated from college. I'm asking, is it true that you cheated on a business partner's daughter, got her pregnant, and were already married to someone else? I didn't invite you to the dinner to put Lena through this. In the midst of an outburst, no one dared to interrupt. Grayson fell out of his chair and crawled on the floor. Where did you spend the money for the wedding? He switched to a tearful apology, even prostrating himself. The missing wedding funds, surprisingly, had gone to pay off alimony to another ex-husband of one of his previous affairs. He had an affair with a married woman. It got exposed, she got divorced, and he used the money for the alimony payment demanded by her ex-husband. My husband, who had taken a liking to the young, obedient Lena, believed that if he could have a child with her, coming from a wealthy family, he could easily resolve any financial issues. Compensation for the affair partner, somehow managing to get through the divorce with me, and what's left afterward is the wealthy in-laws and adorable wife and child. However, such a sweet plan that trampled over others was doomed to fail. I'll consult a lawyer about your case of marriage fraud, and I'll sue you. Of course, I'll report it to your company. You deceived my daughter, be prepared. That's absurd. Lena's father threatened legal action and disciplinary measures at the company. Grayson kept apologizing, but she and their child left with her father. He was held back by security guards. who had rushed in to handle the commotion, and was even reported to the police. All that remained in my hands was the filled-out divorce papers. Afterward, news of my husband's actions quickly reached his workplace, and disciplinary measures were taken. His promotion, which had already been announced, was revoked, and he was demoted due to his highly unprofessional and problematic behavior. The bad reputation also strained relationships with several business partners, putting the company at risk. As a result, Grayson was promptly fired and left without income. Our divorce was successfully finalized, and I was finally free from Grayson. Since our home had been in his name, I moved to a distant apartment to ensure we didn't share the same living space. While my parents were worried about me, they sympathized with me once they learned about Grayson's cruelty and supported me wholeheartedly. Grayson, who faced multiple lawsuits, including alimony for his cheating partner Lena, and child support for his baby, as well as damages sought by his former company, quickly found himself in dire financial straits. Despite the fact that it was his problem to deal with on his own, he audaciously attempted to reconcile with me, and even showed up at the city hall. I was called in to speak with him, probably because I was the one most likely to listen to him. However, now that our divorce had been finalized, I had no reason to entertain his attempts. "We're complete strangers." Most of my colleagues were aware of the situation. While it was embarrassing, fortunately, once I declared this, I was no longer summoned to deal with him. When he visits me again, there were several discussions between Lena and me. Even though the worst part was that he had kept his marriage a secret, she offered to pay compensation for the trouble she had caused. The newborn baby, with the help of both sets of parents, has been growing up healthy and strong. Given this, I refused the financial compensation, as I didn't want to disrupt the peace that had returned. It seemed better to use the money for the child's benefit than to receive it myself. With this understanding, I parted ways with Lena. Grayson struggled to find new employment. He had looked down on the job at the city hall, and he decided to apply for welfare, thinking it would be approved quickly. However, he was unaware of the rigorous evaluation process for assistance payments. The moment his parents were contacted for verification, all his hidden wrongdoing came to light. His very strict parents sent him back home and forced him into a demanding job there. Due to the commotion caused by Grayson's unwarranted visits and other factors, I was transferred to a different branch in the next personnel assignment. It was far away in terms of distance, and the staff there were unaware of the commotion. I managed to work quietly, with the support of my colleagues, and was sent off with warmth. If Grayson had still been around, they would have likely ridiculed me and relegated me to a less favorable position. However, my diligent work was appreciated, and I received better treatment than before. While the new life was challenging, it came with fulfilling work. With problems resolved, a peaceful life finally began.